Putin recently attempted to negotiate a peace deal while raising another 500,000 troops. Whether his attempt at peace was genuine or not, there's every indication that the Russians are regrouping for another major offensive. Putin's Christmas time push for peace was nothing remarkable. I think he knew the deal would be rejected, but he needed that move for the moral high ground. Russia officially says it has lost 6,000 troops in the war, while some Western estimates put that number in the 100,000 area. Again, we see this huge disconnect in the numbers from both sides. Someone, or both, are lying. The Russians have a chance to advance while the ground is frozen in early 2023. Recall that they launched the initial invasion in late February. A somewhat early thaw helped slow their advance as the mud season ruined roads. This is Russia's Cuban Missile Crisis. When NATO decided to move nuclear weapons to their border, it was an act of war, and NATO promised as a condition of Ukrainian independence they would never put nuclear weapons inside the country's borders. It also doesn't help that Ukrainian troops openly wave Nazi flags and have them as battalion symbols. The Russians lost millions in the Second World War defeating the Nazis. It's not something they take lightly. I don't think NATO would have ever launched nuclear weapons at Russia. I've never met the madman interested in ending the world in nuclear fire. You notice even Putin has invaded Ukraine in a tiptoe fashion. Alexander the Great and Napoleon wanted to conquer the world, not engulf it in fire. What would the point be? Russia overreacted, and perhaps was baited into this war as a trap. I'm not really sure what the motivation was to instigate Russia. The conspiracy theorist in me notices that once the Middle East war was finally ended, this one began. War is an important income source to many American companies. You think it is a coincidence that Boeing runs ads on Fox News? What kind of commercial is that? Am I supposed to buy a war drone? These are paybacks and payoffs for loyal service to their company. Even though the war is causing Putin some political problems, he seems very unconcerned about the consequences. Russians are fleeing the country to avoid the draft, and the loss of Western products like the iPhone and McDonald's have not been popular. According to so-called leaked internal Russian polls, only 25% of the Russian populace support the invasion. One can never fully trust such reports in a time of war, though. Perhaps the war has more support than we would like to admit. It may be seen as a necessary evil. I can't imagine it exceeds more than 50%, though. The Russian military is also totally reorganizing its command structure and doctrine. They are going back to the old Soviet style of fighting. Mass tank and artillery formations will engage in bombardments with coordinated troop attacks. Why reorganize your army for this type of combat if surrender is your goal? They were fighting with the more squad-based and independent structure, but often found they were under-supported by artillery and air power. It may sound strange, but the world has forgotten how to go to war, and the Russians are relearning what to do. It's been generations since a major military has deployed tanks against tanks. Coordinating the logistics and attacks of all these weapon systems is mind-boggling. Compounding onto that problem is all of the new tech that no one knows how to deal with. NATO spy satellites are giving away Russian positions in real time. Both sides are launching suicide drones at each other, and the Javelin missile seems far more effective against tanks than the Russians expected. Both sides are having to deal with cell phone and social media posting from their troops. There is evidence that a barracks was destroyed because Ukrainian troops posted a video, which gave away the base's position. We see this in a lot of wars. 1914 World War I troops, with their field caps and mustaches, were a far cry from the 1918 shaved and helmeted soldiers wearing gas masks. I think this war will see huge changes in drone technology and usage. Putin realizes this and has called for an increase in production. Keep in mind they have the approval of China to do this. China is their open secret ally. China has surrounded Taiwan with their navy and cannot wait to team up against the US. China has its eyes on conquering Taiwan and expanding its influence into Africa for their mining rights. Attrition is also a major reason the war will go on. Russia is a massive country with 2 million total in its armed forces. Ukraine can't hold out against that forever, and Russia knows it. It's not just the loss of soldiers, but all of these futuristic drones and smart missiles take time to produce. Money isn't even the only issue, as they do cost a lot. The supply chain has been devastated in the last few years, and the West is having great difficulty producing weapons. The US has been shipping plenty of weapons to help, but what happens once that runs out? Attrition was a big part of how the Soviets defeated the Nazis. Life seems less valuable in their culture than it does to the West. We value the individual, and our stomach for loss of life is much lower than theirs. The Russians have the motivation and the means to slam even harder into Ukraine a second time. We just have to hope and pray it doesn't spill over into Poland, or that there isn't a NATO response that sparks off World War III. All of these factors make me think Russia will strike again as hard as they can. It's certainly not a thing that I want, just my assessment.